everybody. For this month, we picked Children of the Sun by Heru Ptah, but I met the author of this book on the subway, and he seemed like a nice guy. And I figured, you know what? I'll buy and support your book. So I bought it, decided to read it and review it. I think it's supposed to be like a young adult novel, but I'm not sure if it exactly falls into that. But it follows brother and sister Sochi and Aminata. Sochi is, I think, 6, and Aminata is early teens. And they live in DC with their mom and their grandma, who they call Nana. And when their Nana dies, they kind of realize that she has some experience with the supernatural and the metaphysical, and was basically enlisted in saving the universe, basically, from this kind of malevolent ancient god in African lore. And when she dies, the kids kind of take over. They learn on the fly about what's going on. So they find out that this one god named Asar was betrayed by his brother, who was jealous of him, and he disembodied Asar and hid all of his body parts. And I think that the only way to stop this even more primordial god from destroying the universe, this like big floating snake kind of thing, the kids need to find the body parts, put him Asar back together, so that he can destroy this snake god for a second time. And the kids kind of find this out in a very whirlwind, quick way. So it's one of those stories where before they even have a time to process things, they're already in survival mode, where they're trying to figure out what's going on while simultaneously, doing what they need to do. So it did feel kind of rushed in that way, but there's a lot of time travel involved. They go back in time to historical moments. They go to Mali. They go to like the Yucatan Peninsula, basically, where the Mayans were. They go to other places in Africa, Mesopotamia,
Egypt.
And it deals a lot with spirits. So they're hopping in and out of bodies, but they're retaining memories from these people that either had just died or were about to die. And I thought it was kind of cool, kind of fun. It just happened so fast, and there's a lot of history lesson in it, which I thought was interesting, but it took away from the amount of time he had to develop the characters, or at least make it in a more effective and believable way. It was interesting, and it was pretty fun. I enjoyed it overall.
Yeah, I think for me, it read close to a middle grade book. And it gave me, maybe it was like the 3 character setup with the 2 girls and the young boy, where it reminded me kind of Wrinkle in Time, kind of like, I'm not saying that he ripped off the story from her, I'm saying like the concept and idea is similar. And I think overall, like after a while, you got used to his template of storytelling really quick. It was kind of like copy paste, but like new era, new time period. Pacing became an issue because as Mike mentioned, he would spend a great time of giving you the history and explaining and giving into that like nitty gritty, like the research bit. You can tell that he actually like sat and tried to put together and were mindful of the time periods that he selected. But I feel like a lot for being kids, and for kids, one being like a 6-year-old and 2 like teenagers, they were very accepting of the situation that they're being, like literally like being time traveling, understanding like the magic and their circumstances, just so they can speed up his story and get into like the situation at hand. I think the story could have benefited from having like a little buddy of some kind, whether it be an animal or a spirit, that goes with them to help them like understand like the magic system. This is why like you don't lose the staff, because the staff is the only way for you to go back, not to just jump time periods, but if you want to go back to your time, you need the staff no matter what. You can't lose that. So I think if there was someone to help them like with the rules of the world, because we only got one situation in the book, and I believe this is like what, the 3rd time stop when they went to Egypt.
It was towards the end.
Yeah, where like they meet, they go into the pyramids and they meet like Tutankhamun or something like that, and he like very quickly goes, "This is all the stuff that you need to know. now leave or you're gonna die right now. Because the guy is like the bad character, the Black Angel, is like on your heels, and I have to like I can only do so much to keep him off your trail for so long. So I feel like that could have helped with pacing and also made the kids more reliable because the like I think Sochi, he's a savant. He is very very smart and like he kind of goes like, oh, I know this time period. This and this, and like even though the Amaris.
Amaris.
Amaris was like, how do you know all this stuff?
So
she was like, I don't know who he is. Like, yeah, that guy.
yeah, so one of the other characters that's a main component is a former friend of Aminata. And when they were younger, they moved out of a more impoverished area and into a more affluent area. And Amaris, the friend, became a little bitter and resentful. And in the point of the story where the story starts, she has some friends who are basically saying, "Oh, isn't that girl the girl that left you and thinks that she's better than all of us?" Mm-hmm. And we should beat her up. And the friend is like, "Yeah, let's do it." And then they're kind of forced to rekindle their friendship through this adventure that they're all partaking in. But yeah, I mean, overall I thought it was okay.
Yeah.
But it definitely could have benefited from a better editor. I do feel like it's nice to have a story where it's gods from African lore, and that's kind of unique to me, which is nice. And the kids are they come from a different background than what we're normally seeing in these stories, and I think it's a really cool perspective, and I appreciated that. But yeah, it all the characters, it's like those kids movies that you saw back in the 90s with like Surf Ninjas or whatever. Yeah. Or like the Three Ninjas, where it's like the little kid, they're all kind of goofy and not very, they're all overly mature for their age and then immature at the weirdest times. Yeah. Like a 6-year-old, I think in his head, a 6-year-old, he wasn't imagining a 6-year-old doing these things.
Well, yeah, he kind of.
But he made the character a 6-year-old in writing.
Yeah, I think he banged on because since the kid is so smart, he acts like mature beyond his years. It's kind of like the feeling I got, and I was like, okay, yeah, fine, because that's how Charlie Wallace was in Wrinkle of Time, where he was like 6 or 7, but he was like talking. Like was very smart and was like
but it's not
beyond his years. I think he was like banking on that.
I know, but in reality
it's not true.
Well, in reality, someone that's smart, they're not socially adept. There's no wisdom there or experience. It's literally just being able to memorize facts, or to be able to solve a complex math problem. I don't think it really translates in reality the way that it does in the book. I don't know if a 6-year-old boy, if they're put into a grown woman's body, that they're going to be like, oh, just obsessed with boobs. I don't think a 6-year-old is going to do that, And I also don't think they're going to have the focus to do any of the things that these characters do. But my point is that, like, I think it's really stretching the limits of what a kids their ages would do.
Yeah.
The high schoolers, Aminata and Amaris, that seemed normal. That's fine. But the 6-year-old boy was a bit of a stretch.
Yeah. What became like interesting in this again is where the benefit of like maybe a guide could help, because apparently Nana and Sochi had a really close relationship. Mm-hmm. And then when it was time for her to essentially die, she was like, oh, Sochi, I taught you everything that you know. And then he was like, yeah, Grandma. And all of a sudden, when Amaris and Amaretta come and like, oh, it was okay. He's like, well, I'm going to show you everything because Grandma showed me. And I'm like, when? You're 6. When did you have the time to like I get it. Again, the author uses him as being really smart, why he can get away of not like explaining everything. But I think if there was more background, because we get a little bit of background of Nana and how she got a hold of the staff and how she kind of became, I think the goddess or whatever approached her and like, oh, you have to help me get ready and prepare for like the big battle. So that was like Nana's role, but it was very quick in which it was told. So I kind of wish there was more development there so we can learn about the magic system or the faith system that the Nana knows and believes in and how she got into it, and then how and then how quickly she was able to teach Sochi how to understand everything and how everything works. I think that was like the only like thing I couldn't quite understand.
It's like, I mean, it's very fantastical, this story.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's kind of like I'm fine with it. I think it's it's an interesting take. It does get a little dark and a little deep at certain points. But the story's told in a way that everything feels rushed, so you don't have a chance to breathe, and that's not necessarily a good thing in this case.
Yeah, and I think too, like this is like the first book, right?
Yeah, it was definitely designed. It was definitely designed to be a one in a series. It was broken up because of the ending. It's very ambiguous, and it's kind of like the horror movies where like at the very, everything's fine. They kill the bad guy or the evil thing or whatever it is, and the bad thing, and they're like, oh, we did it, we survived. Look, I'm missing an arm, but we made it. And then at the very last second of the movie, it comes back to life, or a different bad guy comes in, a different bad person or thing comes in, and it's like, no, the story isn't done.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like he might have focused too much on that aspect than the actual story he was trying to tell.
Well, I think there's like also like an interesting aspect, and I think this kind of comes into like the maturity of the characters. You're like, wait, they understand that quickly? Because I think when they're in the pyramid with King Tut, they're explaining how like there's like 9 lives, and how at least like I think Amy is on on her 7th life, and then Amorous is on her 2nd life, or Amanita, I forget her name, was on her 2nd life, and then Sochi, he's essentially on his last life. So this is his last, and like they're all like Sochi's like. And apparently he's like, you can tell that the author is setting up Sochi to be like the ultimate character in the end that's going to like probably defeat the bad character, because this is his last life. And then once he dies in his 9th life, he gets like immortality or something like that, I believe was like explained. But like the way that like how all the kids were like, what do you mean I'm going to essentially, the feeling I got like in this series, essentially one of the kids is going to die. And it got really quickly accepted. Like, okay, but we have to defeat the bad guy. And you're like, okay. And I thought that was interesting. It's like, oh, tell me more about these lives. And like,
yeah, it kind of deals with a lot of spiritual ideas,
like reincarnation, and
but it doesn't really go into any of them, and there's no development.
Yeah, and like the kids are very accepting of it.
Yeah, it's more like he uses them as just like a really quick, cheap mechanism for them to move on to the next level or the next part of the story. Because every time they get taken to a different period of time and put into these other bodies, it's very predictable, where it's like, okay, they get sent to this thing. They know that they need to find these orbs that are Asar's body parts. And then they also know that they're automatically starting close to it, because Sochi is able to sense it, and that they're close. And then obviously something happens to muck it up. And it's something that's kind of related to real history, but it's just very predictable. And then at the last second of each time, they're able to get the thing that they're looking for, and then bounce out of that situation. And it happens so quickly, it's so predictable, and it happens so quickly. So I don't know. So how many Kisas do you give it?
So I think I was generous, and I gave it a 4-star. And I think we have read other self-published books, and comparing the two, this was like a higher caliber. If you know the book that I'm talking about that is lower caliber.
It's definitely better than that book.
That book. And also it's a middle grade book in my opinion. So that I think it wasn't geared towards me. And I think if certain things were tweaked, I think it is a strong 4-star book. Because like you can tell that the author had passion behind it, had a good concept. I think if he developed certain things more and then worked with an editor for the pacing, it can be easily translated to be on like a Netflix show or Hulu or HBO, or maybe a movie, who knows. But like how it can be easily adaptable with interest, because it has that lore and fantasy that kids tend to like.
Yeah, I think the author is really talented, and I think he worked in the industry, it said in the blurb.
Yeah.
And he also writes poetry and does all these other things. I could definitely see it as a show or a movie or something like that. And I was really impressed for buying something off the subway. And I think it's really cool that he was just walking around and offering it. You could buy a lot of things on the subway, and now decent books, is one of them.
Mhm.
But yeah, super super impressed. I give it 3 Kisas though. Um, I agree with you though that with a better editor and a little bit more guidance, it could easily be something that like explodes and becomes viral, and it has a lot of potential. I think. I don't know if he wrote the second book. I don't know if he, maybe we're wrong and there was no intention for a second book. I don't think I'd read it anyway, but yeah, overall pretty good. Three Kisas, but a strong 3 Kisas.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think, for me, like I said, Jenner was like, it could be a 4, but I think it could be a strong 4, as I said, with the things that I noted.
But yeah, so thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next month.
Yep. First Sunday of every month. Like, subscribe, comment down below. And then hopefully we'll see you in the next one.
See ya.
Bye.